Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. Her hand snapped the headwrap off my kid, no warning, just claws. Ava's curls sprang out and she jerked behind me fast. "Stop trying to unblack my granddaughter," the woman hissed through teeth. Gasps popped around the school lobby like bubbles that could cut. I knew this would spiral if I blinked first. I'm Mara, 32, and my jaw locked hard. I kept my arms loose because Ava watched my breath. The wrap hung from the woman's fist like a threat. "You don't touch my child," I said with steady edges. A teacher froze at the door and hovered for backup. The woman leaned in close enough to count my pores. "You light her mind and darken her soul," she spit. Her voice traveled across tile and pulled phones from pockets. Ava pressed into my hip and stared at the floor. I felt the room decide who to follow. I reached for the wrap and she slapped my knuckles. The crack echoed and a tiny cheer came from somewhere. "Keep your products away from her," she growled and squared up. "You think lotion is a plot?" I asked and held eye contact. She smiled like a verdict was already signed. "First the creams, then the devil's symbols," she announced with relish. She lifted Ava's astronomy badge like it burned her skin. A star with 5 points, nothing else, yet she trembled. "Cosmic gateways lure children," she said and waved it high. Ava's lips shook and the hallway darkened in my head. A vice principal slid between us with careful shoulders. "Let's step into my office," he murmured and kept distance. The woman didn't budge and planted her heels in place. "Everyone should hear this," she said and puffed up. I pictured every rumor grinding into a report. "Office now," I said, and the man nodded quickly. I guided Ava forward and felt heat in my wrists. The woman followed close enough to bump my elbow twice. "Try to hide behind doors," she taunted under her breath. I breathed once and prepared for impact. Inside, the door clicked and the air still felt public. The vice principal perched by the file cabinet and waited. "Explain the head wrap," he said, voice too neutral to trust. "For sleep and breakage," I answered and held his gaze. The woman laughed like a gavel had finally fallen. "She erases culture with fancy routines," she declared and preened. "She feeds the child Satan through science and stars," she added. Ava flinched at the word and tucked her badge away. My throat tightened but my voice came out clean. "Accusations come with proof, not theater," I said, calm, sharp. The man scratched a note and shifted in his shoes. "Any concerns should follow procedure," he offered and avoided me. The woman slid a printed screenshot across the desk slowly. A picture of Ava at our kitchen table under stencils. "The shape summons spirits," she whispered like a secret victory. I looked at the photo and felt the trap spring. The stencils were constellations we traced for homework last night. No candles, no chants, just lines and homework and laughter. But the frame crop hid all that on purpose, grim. I saw how stories bend when someone craves a villain. Ava whispered near my sleeve and barely breathed it. "Did I do bad?" she asked and folded into herself. I touched her shoulder and kept my eyes forward. "You did your assignment," I said and let it land. The woman snorted like truth was a stray to kick. The vice principal cleared his throat and checked the clock. "We will document and follow up," he announced in cautious rhythm. He asked for our evening schedule and any after-school groups. Every answer felt like a tile that could crack. I measured each word because we were already slipping. The woman moved toward the door with a satisfied shrug. "I'll keep my eyes on this child," she said without blinking. She paused long enough to grin at Ava's small shoes. "Your mother cannot hide what she is," she whispered. I stepped between them and felt my pulse pound. She finally left and the room exhaled in pieces. The vice principal avoided my face and stacked papers twice. "I'll call if we need more context," he muttered without commitment. I gathered the wrap and tucked it into my pocket. This wasn't over and she knew the next move. Outside, parents pretended not to stare but missed the mark. Someone recorded in the reflection of a car door, shiny and merciless. Ava squeezed my fingers so tight my ring bit skin. "Are we in trouble?" she asked and watched my mouth. "Not us," I said, though trouble had already chosen us. We reached the curb and the woman waited by the crosswalk. She held a small bottle and lifted it like evidence. "Whitening moisturizer," she announced to a cluster of eager ears. I recognized our sunscreen and tasted iron under my tongue. She had something planned and the crowd wanted a show. "Give it back," I said and extended my hand. She dangled it like bait and smiled for the cameras. Confess you use this daily, she demanded with that sugary tone. I took one step closer and my shadow covered hers. Confess you framed us, I said and didn't blink. Her eyes flickered and her grip tightened around the bottle. Traffic roared and a horn stabbed the moment clean. Ava leaned against my side and whispered for home now. I nodded once and the woman stepped in front. Not until you admit what you are, she breathed. I looked at her and saw tomorrow's headlines forming silently. I pictured offices and forms and strangers in our kitchen. I pictured Ava handing over her badge to stay safe. The choice sharpened inside me like a key turning. Move or I call the police, I said dead calm. She flinched at the word and tossed the bottle down. It rolled toward the gutter and knocked against my shoe. A tiny clink marked the line she wouldn't cross yet. She forced a smile and stepped aside with theatrical grace. This is only the beginning, she promised and drifted off. I walked Ava to the car and locked the doors quickly. My hands shook on the wheel and steadied when she hummed. We pulled away while the lobby shrank in the mirror. I caught the woman lifting a phone to her ear. Whatever she started in there would spread by nightfall. The email hit before dinner, subject line glowing like a siren. Allegation received, preliminary check scheduled, that was the whole body. Ava read my face and set down her fork slowly. I typed 3 replies, deleted all 3, then braced for impact. Her number lit up next, the caller ID I dreaded. I let it ring out, then the voicemail transcribed itself. Return the child's spirit to her people, her words clipped hard. I saved the file and felt my hands go still. My doorbell chimed while the voicemail kept droning. A neighbor hovered on the porch with forced sympathy. She asked me to watch for strange rituals, he whispered. I held the door halfway and asked what he had seen. Stars in chalk on your patio, he muttered and blushed. Homework, I answered, and his eyes darted toward the street. She sounded convincing, he added, then backed down the steps. He paused at the curb like a lookout awaiting orders. I texted my partner one line only, urgent, home now. 3 dots appeared then vanished twice before a short reply landed. Coming, no explanation, no apology, just a promise I would test. I paced the hallway and rehearsed boundaries I could enforce. He walked in and checked our kid first, good instinct intact. I showed him the email without a single extra word. His jaw tightened while he read the voicemail transcript twice. We confront her tonight, he said and reached for his keys. Not alone, I countered and slid my phone between us. Screenshots waited like loaded traps I refused to trigger early. We gather evidence, then we choose the time, I said. He stared at the door like it might bite back. A ping interrupted us, the school's auto system pulsed again. Follow-up conversation at 8 tomorrow. No greeting, no signature. Ava hovered near the hall and tried to look brave. I knelt and promised structure even if the ground shifted. Is the star badge dangerous? She asked, eyes searching mine. It marks curiosity, I answered and let the word settle. She touched the badge and studied my steady mouth. We keep learning, I told her and meant all of it. I opened a blank note and built a timeline fast. Moments, quotes, screens, names, no filler, only triggers and outcomes. If they asked for clarity, I would hand them a spine. If they wanted theater, I would give them silence. Another alert arrived, group chat screenshots from a cousin ally. Her message was short, you should see this one. The image showed a checklist labeled protection plan in bold. Next to it my address and a time I recognized. We leave now, my partner said, voice rigid as rebar. We stay put, I answered and set the deadbolt gently. Let them waste a drive while we rode our own path. He exhaled through his teeth and finally took a seat. My phone buzzed with a video from the parking lot crowd. There I was, handout, voice calm, eyes unblinking. Her followers captioned it with red arrows and new lies. The comment count jumped like sparks hunting dry grass. I uploaded our copy that showed the sunscreen label clearly. No filters, no edits, just the front and the ingredients. I added one line, this keeps a child from burning. Then I locked replies because fire loves oxygen. A private number called and I answered on speaker. A steady voice introduced an initial welfare check for tomorrow. Have the child present and routines available, the voice continued. I agreed, then asked for their badge number and recorded it. We staged the kitchen for practical questions, not spectacle. Receipts, schedules, the science workbook Ava loved lately. My partner laid out the camp forms in quiet order. We rehearsed who would speak and when to pause. Ava peeked in and watched us like a referee. What happens if they believe her? She asked, barely above a breath. We show truth until it sticks, I said without blinking. She nodded once, then tucked the workbook under her arm. Across the room, my partner's phone vibrated again and again. He silenced it and stared at the wall with new resolve. I handle my side, he muttered, then opened a draft. His thumbs moved like he was cutting a rope. He typed a message to his mother and kept it simple. Stop contacting the school about demons, stop reaching out to neighbors. He deleted the last sentence twice, then let it stand. He pressed send, then switched the phone face down. The car idled outside and headlights washed over the blinds. Footsteps approached, then paused, then retreated down the walkway. I counted 10 beats and felt my chest loosen slightly. They were probing our edges, testing how far we'd bend. The doorbell rang once more, long and insistent this time. I checked the peephole and saw a familiar church coat. He held a pamphlet in a nervous half-smile. We would like to pray over the child, he murmured. Not tonight, I answered through the door with even tone. He glanced at the street like he expected an audience. Influences gather at night, he warned and tightened his grip. I repeated no and waited until his steps faded. My partner leaned against the wall and finally asked the hard one. Do we file first thing or wait for tomorrow? He breathed. File now, I said and felt the change inside me. I opened the portal and began the report, simple and exact. I attached the video, the email, the voicemail, the checklist. I listed the porch visit and the church request tonight. I noted the time for the supposed protection plan. Then I hit submit and watched the confirmation blink. Ava appeared in the doorway with her bonnet in hand. She raised it like a question and waited for my cue. On, I said, and she smiled at the ritual's rhythm. We stood together while she tied the knot tight. When the house finally quieted, my phone vibrated one last time. A text from an unknown number flashed a threat. Tomorrow you will answer to the community, no name attached. I screenshot it and added it to the stacked top page. I lay awake and replayed each angle like chess. Where they would press, where we would stand without blinking. The knock would come early, I could feel the cadence already. I set an alarm, then let the dark count down. The knock landed before my alarm finished its first buzz. 2 workers stood on the porch with clipboards and steady eyes. Safety check, the taller one said, badge at chest level. I unlocked the door and kept my shoulders square for impact. They asked where my child slept and what mornings looked like. I walked them through our routine without adding extra shine. Ava stood by the table with her club pin tucked away. Show us a usual hair night, the shorter one requested quietly. I brought out the silk wrap and the moisturizer we always use. Demonstrate, the taller one said, arms folded across his vest. I tied the wrap and named each step like a drill. Ava held still and mouthed the last step with me. They flipped to a new page and checked off 5 boxes. Any recent visitors with strong opinions? The shorter one asked. I answered yes and listed the porch clergy from last night. He wrote a time and underlined it twice without comment. The taller one pulled out a printed image I hadn't seen. It showed my kid tracing shapes while a shadow loomed. Where did this come from? I asked, pulse kicking hard. Anonymous submission, he answered and watched my eyes closely. Check the edge, I said and pointed at the crop. The frame cut off the math workbook to sell a lie. I slid our video across the table and hit play. Numbers filled the audio with my child's voice counting aloud. They paused the clip and replayed the count to confirm. We will attach this to the file, the taller one noted. The shorter one looked toward the hallway where my partner waited. Any conflicts between caregivers? He asked, voice neutral but firm. We agree on care and education, I answered without pause. My partner stepped forward and nodded once with a fixed jaw. He placed a folder down with receipts and dates in order. The officers exchanged a look that loosened my breath slightly. The taller one closed his binder and softened his tone. Expect outreach from the reporting party today, he told us. Do not engage near the campus, he added with emphasis. I agreed, though we still had that meeting at 8. We reached the school lot while the first bell echoed. A staffer waved us inside with careful distance and stiff shoulders. In the office, the counselor already had a stack ready. On top, a signed statement accusing me of dark grooming. Who delivered that? I asked, keeping my voice level enough. The counselor glanced at the doorway and pressed lips together. She arrived early, he said. Hen lowered his voice. She brought a church representative for moral guidance, he added. The representative entered before I could respond or breathe. He clasped his hands and asked to open with prayer. No, I answered and moved my chair half an inch. His smile thinned and he sat without breaking eye contact. She swept in behind him with a triumphant lift of chin. No greeting, no pause, just a folder raised like a sword. Consent to a cleansing ritual and supervised visits, she announced. A staff assistant flinched and looked toward the hallway for help. Sit, the counselor requested, palms down on the desk. I placed my phone on the wood with the recorder visible. Her eyes flicked to it and then to my kid. You parade her around with occult symbols, she sneered and leaned forward. I slid a printout across that showed the science fair entry. The heading screamed solar system model with the date stamped clearly. I tapped the date and waited as the room listened hard. She skimmed past it like facts were gnats around a drum. The representative cleared his throat and tried a gentler angle. Perhaps we compromise with temporary spiritual support, he ventured carefully. School does not endorse rights, the counselor cut in quickly. I watched her jaw flex as that door slammed shut. She opened another page and pointed to highlighted lines. Neighbors claimed chanting after dusk and strange markings on pavement. I held up last night's timestamped workbook video in response. Play it, the counselor asked and scooted his chair closer. The multiplication table filled the room with steady rhythm. Ava whispered answers, then laughed when she got one wrong. Silence followed the clip like someone stole the air. The representative stared at his hands and stopped making suggestions. She pivoted fast and aimed at my marriage next. Your home is divided, she declared, now hunting for cracks. My partner leaned in with a calm that belonged to storms. Our child is loved and safe, he said, voice like iron. The counselor wrote 2 sentences and capped his pen. This meeting becomes a formal mediation if accusations continue, he stated. He looked at us first, then at her slowly. She smirked and whispered to the representative without moving her mouth. I pulled out one last page that ended the discussion. A text from an unknown number promising public judgment this morning. The area code matched her relative out of state. The counselor took a photo and filed it under threat. She rose halfway and tried to rally the room again. Culture is under attack, she called out toward the door. No one answered, so she targeted me with a glare. I will not stand by while you strip identity, she hissed. I stood fully and kept my words short and surgical. You end this now or you see court orders, I warned. My partner lifted his phone and opened the attorney contact. Her eyes narrowed like she finally recognized the cliff edge. The counselor concluded with a final directive that cut clean. All future contact goes through the office, he announced plainly. He set a review date and closed the folder with finality. She stared at the shut file like it stole her voice. We escorted Ava down the hall while whispers trailed. My kid squeezed my hand once and steadied her breathing. She looked up and asked if numbers could still be fun. Yes, I said, and the word felt like armor wrapped tight. Outside, a reporter waited near the crosswalk with a camera crew. He asked for a comment about ritual concerns at our address. I met his lens and kept the message razor simple. My child studies science, I said, then walked away on purpose. My phone pinged as we reached the curb again. A new alert showed a live stream scheduled by her circle. Title line promised deliverance at our block this evening. I saved the link and felt the next fight stepping closer. The live stream counter ticked upward while vans rolled onto our street. Voices gathered, low at first, then loud enough to rattle windows. Banner unfurled with my address scrawled across the top line. I dialed non-emergency and logged the disturbance with clipped breaths. A chant started as a woman shook a metal rattle hard. Their leader lifted a Bible and named my child out loud. Ava's shoulders rose under her hoodie, then dropped when I knelt. We stay inside until police arrive, I told her, no wiggle. My partner stepped onto the porch and held up his hand. Back away from our property, he called in a steady baritone. A camera swung toward him and the chat exploded with emojis. I hit record from the window and tracked every face. Her sedan pulled up late like a general savoring entrance. She stepped out, smoothing her jacket before flashing a smile. Bring the girl, she commanded, voice syrupy and sharp at once. The crowd parted for her like they had practiced this. I moved to the edge of the porch and squared my stance. You? Will not cross this line, I told her straight. She placed one toe on the seam and dared me. Ava's hand gripped my sleeve and didn't let go. A neighbor jogged over with a clipboard held high. Petition to keep demonstrations off this block, he announced, breathless. He waved signatures from both sides of the cul-de-sac. The livestream zoomed in and mocked every name with laughter. Sirens approached slow, then stopped at the corner deliberately. 2 officers walked up and asked for whoever organized. Several fingers pointed at her in a perfect synchronized move. She smiled wider and claimed a community rescue under rights. Noise complaint and harassment, I responded without raising my voice. I showed the text threatening judgment scheduled for tonight. The officer read it twice and radioed a supervisor calmly. He asked them to keep off the curb until he returned. She whispered to her followers and a new chant began. Return the child to heritage, they shouted in tight rhythm. A man pulled chalk from his pocket and crouched at our driveway. He drew a star and labeled it evidence of cult. I stepped down and planted my foot over the mark. Leave that there, he barked, eyes flashing with petty triumph. I lifted my phone close enough to hear his breathing. You're on video defacing private property, I said and held. The officer came back with a clipboard and a warning notice. Unlawful assembly if you block the entrance, he explained clearly. He asked her to identify the minors in her group. 3 teens shuffled behind signs and looked suddenly uncertain. She pivoted quick and tried to serve me a letter. Supervised contact agreement, she announced for the camera's benefit. I didn't touch the page and the officer stepped between. Do not pass documents without consent, he instructed with finality. A woman from their circle broke formation and walked to me. I used to braid her hair, she murmured with moist eyes. She needs cultural covering, not astronomy, her voice shook like glass. I breathed once and kept my reply focused and brief. My child is not your spectacle, I told her clean. I pointed at the car recording plates like trophies. This stream ends or citations start, the officer announced over his shoulder. Someone in the back cursed and the chat count dipped. Her face hardened when the first car pulled away. She raised both hands and called for a prayer battle. Heads bowed on command while microphones stayed pointed at us. I could feel the strategy shifting under our feet. A rock skittered across the sidewalk and tapped our step. The officer snapped to attention and scanned the crowd fast. I knew that tap would become a rumor about demons. I rolled the rock back into the driveway and filmed it. My partner dialed our attorney and gave a 1-line update. The reply returned fast with instructions for a protective filing. Document trespass and direct threats, the message read plainly. He typed back yes and asked for a meeting first light. She tried one last push with a smile that cut. Let me take the child for cleansing and community witness. Her eyes flicked toward the camera and brightened at the word witness. I stepped forward and the officer raised a palm between. Final warning, he told her, voice flat as concrete. Disperse within 5 minutes or we clear the street. She held my gaze and waited for me to flinch first. I didn't, and something in her calculation wobbled. The chant thinned as engines turned over in defeat. A few lingered to film our porch like it might confess. She retreated last and dragged her stare across my daughter. We will return with elders, she promised and slid into the sedan. The officer logged statements while I scrolled the live chat. A comment mentioned plans for tomorrow behind the school dumpsters. Another bragged about a teacher willing to talk off record. I saved screenshots and labeled them by time for later use. After the last van left, the block exhaled in pieces. My partner stood beside me and rested his palm on the rail. He whispered that he finally understood the depth of her game. I felt the same realization settle like armor I could lift. We went inside as a message pinged from the counselor. Staff received contact from an outside group about removal protocols. The timestamp matched their chanting like teeth in a gear. I typed back one word only, documented, then I locked every door. In the quiet, my kid asked a question that pierced. Does loving stars make me less of what she wants? I pulled her close and let the silence hold for a beat. No one owns your identity, I told her and meant fight. Another alert arrived before I could power down my phone. A map pin blinked near our block with tomorrow's deliverance walk. Route ended at our curb with confetti emojis lined up. I screenshotted the path and felt tomorrow start early. Her van idled by the courthouse steps before we parked. She watched our spot like a hunter measuring distance. I opened the door and kept my body between her and Ava. Turn around, I warned, and felt my pulse steady for the fight. She lifted a folder and attempted to hand me forms. Voluntary custody transition, the cover read in block letters. I let it hover in the air untouched while cameras clicked. A bailiff noticed the cluster and waved us inside fast. Security scanned my bag while she argued with the guard. We're filing for protection, I told the clerk with even tone. He stamped a number and pointed toward a small hearing room. I texted our attorney the door sign and took a breath anyway. She slipped in behind us despite the bailiff's hand. Parties only, the clerk repeated, sharper now, eyes narrowed. She tried to bluff his kin with assumed authority. The bailiff blocked her shoulder and closed the door hard. The judge looked at my exhibits without slowing his pen. Video, threat text, route map, porch footage with chance. He skimmed each piece, then asked one question. Any attempt to remove the child from your presence today? Not today, I answered, but she plans a street action. He nodded once and issued a temporary stay with urgency. No proximity within 200 feet of the child. The words landed like a platform I could finally stand on. We stepped back into the hall just as she surged forward. I raised the fresh order and held her gaze flat. She read the header and forced a dry chuckle that cracked. Paper burns, she muttered, then shoved a leaflet at a stranger. Outside, a reporter recognized us and tried for a quote. Is the court siding with science over faith? He prodded. I kept it short and brutal. The court sided with a child. He blinked, then checked his notes like I had moved the target. My partner guided us to the car while I called the school. Do not release our kid to anyone, I told the office. Order on file within the hour, clear, simple, final. The secretary confirmed and promised to brief the dismissal team hard. We reached campus minutes before the last bell sounded. 2 security staff already stood near the gate on alert. I handed copies of the order and watched their faces change. One guard nodded toward the far sidewalk where phones were raised again. Her followers gathered near the crosswalk holding new placards. A familiar church coat hovered at the edge like a shadow. They kept to the public line, careful and taunting. I filmed their positions and noted license plates for later. Dismissal began and streams of backpacks poured toward buses. She appeared at the far curb and waved like family. Come here, baby, she called, voice smooth and poisonous. A guard stepped between them and extended the printed order calmly. Ava spotted me and sprinted with her club pin tucked tight. I crouched and she slammed into my chest with relief. Straight to the car, I said, and felt her grip lock. Behind us, voices rose and a sign smacked the fence once. A youth from their cluster reached for the gate latch. The guard moved quicker and snapped the lock shut. My partner opened the back door and shielded our kid. Someone yelled abduction, and phones whipped toward our plates like guns. We pulled out while the principal documented on a tablet. At the exit, a sedan tried to cut us off intentionally. I braked hard, then angled past with inches to spare. The sedan stalled, then swung behind us like a tail. I dialed the non-emergency line and reported an aggressive vehicle. Gave the model, gave the last 4 of the plate. The dispatcher logged pursuit and patched a patrol nearby. Continue safe, do not engage. I followed that order like a creed. The sedan peeled away when sirens flickered 2 blocks back. My phone buzzed with a new notification mid-turn. A scheduled heritage procession had just updated its start time. They moved it earlier to catch us before dusk. We reached home and found a sealed envelope under the mat. Inside, a signed affidavit from a neighbor she had recruited. His statement mentioned night voices and unusual diagrams. I recognized the handwriting as the man who had blushed on my porch. I called him while my partner watched the street with folded arms. Withdraw the false report, I said, voice steady, no fluff. He hesitated, then admitted he felt cornered by her group. Meet me at the mailbox, I told him, bring your signature. He shuffled over with head down and hands shaking. I'll draft a retraction tonight, he whispered, eyes glistening. Do it now, I pressed and opened a note app. He dictated a revised statement that named her pressure tactics outright. My partner forwarded the retraction to the counselor immediately. Within minutes, the counselor replied with a brief acknowledgement. Received, attached to file, clean, crisp, satisfying. Another line followed, expect activist presence at evening pickup near athletics. I looked at the map pin still blinking from last night. Their route would pass our curb within the hour now. I messaged our attorney and asked for guidance on contempt. Record any approach within the restricted distance, he replied at once. Car door slammed outside and the chorus started early. I peered through the side window and counted 10 faces. They walked shoulder to shoulder carrying a new banner. In the center, her stare burned through fabric like intent. I stepped onto the porch with my phone already rolling. Stop there, I announced, holding the order at chest height. She paused just shy of the line A. Indy smiled wide. Community watch, she sang, and the group echoed like a stage. A teen moved forward and placed a chalk mark on the curb. Boundary of cleansing, he declared, eyes darting toward the camera. I zoomed in and captured his bracelet and initials. Step back, I warned, you're inside 200 feet. She lifted her hands and urged them closer with tiny flicks. 2 more toes edged the line while the chorus swelled. A neighbor yelled to keep it down and slammed a door. The noise bounced and drew more viewers to their livestream feed. Patrol cars turned the corner slower than I wanted. The officer recognized our address and parked across the street. He walked up with a body cam blinking and a firm stance. Move away from the residence, he instructed, pointing to the sidewalk. She tried a new tactic with sticky sweetness on top. We're documenting spiritual harm for the record, she cooed theatrically. The officer held out the order and tapped the distance clause. Violation equals arrest, he said, each word spaced like nails. A man with a drum sneered and stepped over the chalk. I raised my voice with the count from the curb. 1, 2, 3, each number a promise I would keep. On 4, the officer signaled his partner to separate him out. The group wavered when handcuffs flashed near wrists. She hissed something I couldn't catch and dropped her gaze. Back to the line, the officer ordered, and the field shifted. They shuffled backward, muttering, still filming, still hungry. Then she aimed lower and spoke my child's name softly. Ava stood behind the window with a hand at her heart. I moved to block the view and nodded to my partner. He closed the curtain and stood there like a shield. I told the officer about the updated parade time. He wrote the detail and called for a supervisor again. Command unit arrived and began taking witness statements. Her crew sputtered while the watch commander measured every inch. Violation documented, the commander announced for the cameras to hear. Further approach triggers immediate custody, the words cut through their chant. She adjusted her scarf and forced a laugh that rattled. See you in court, she tossed out, but the wind changed. They retreated to the corner and argued among themselves. We stayed still and let the officer check our porch. He pointed at the chalk sigil and asked permission to wash it. Leave it, I answered, it tells a story we'll need. When the last activist car rolled away, I unlocked the door. My phone buzzed yet again with a blocked number text. New witness coming to the school, it threatened, a teacher who knows. I forwarded it to the counselor and our attorney without a word. Dinner stayed untouched as I prepared a timeline for tomorrow. I listed approach angles and exact phrases used at the curb. I flagged the teen's bracelet and the drum carrier's tattoo. Patterns emerged like coordinates pointing straight at her command. A quiet knock broke my focus 15 minutes later. The neighbor from earlier returned, breathing hard, eyes frantic. They want me on camera to confirm chants, he blurted. I told them no, he swallowed. They said consequences come. Document that threat, I urged, and lifted my phone again. He repeated it for the mic and signed his name. I promised to share nothing public without his consent. He nodded and looked toward her street like it might bite. My partner's phone flashed with an incoming call at once. He answered, then put it on speaker for both of us. Her voice filled the room with brittle clarity and rage. Return the child for elder counsel or face community discipline. Stop calling this number, my partner cut in, tone glacial. Court order blocks you from our child, each word landed heavy. She exhaled into the speaker like steam from a buried pipe. You think paper is power, she taunted, then killed the call. I saved the log and appended it to our evidence set. The stack had weight now, not just noise and fear. I felt the shift inside me as resolve replaced ache. Tomorrow wouldn't be defense anymore, tomorrow would be action. The supervisor called at dawn, case conference moved up with mandatory attendance. Bring the recordings and timeline, the voice instructed, brisk and clipped. I strapped the binder under my arm and checked the door chain. Today wouldn't be a shield day, today I would press first. We reached the district office while my partner parked around back. Two investigators waited near reception with digital pens already awake. "Walk us through the sequence since the last check," one requested. I stacked videos in order and kept my answers tight. They paused on the driveway clip where the teen drew symbols. "Identify him if you can," the investigator asked without blinking. I zoomed on his bracelet and the initials popped clear. She leaned closer, then jotted a line that felt decisive. "A staff lawyer N. Turd with a file marked interim restrictions. Preliminary findings show harassment and attempted interference," he summarized calmly. "We're recommending monitored contact only if any contact proceeds." My ribs loosened a fraction while I kept my eyes forward. The door opened again and she marched in with a cleric. A third chair scraped as the district coordinator set boundaries. "One person speaks at a time," the coordinator warned, voice flat. The cleric nodded, already scanning for angles to exploit. She started with a printed packet and a sugary tone. "My granddaughter faces spiritual danger," she announced toward the ceiling. The coordinator lifted a hand before the speech could swell. "Evidence only," he ordered and tapped the table twice. I pressed play on the porch clip with the chalk mark. Then the threat text naming a teacher as future witness. Then the phone call at midnight demanding elder control. The room shifted as the timeline formed its vertebrae. The investigator asked my partner a direct question next. "Do you support the child's routines and scientific interests?" "Yes," he answered, eyes on me, voice steady and iron. He added one line, "We protect her autonomy." The phrase landed. She tried to pivot to community customs with a half smile. The staff lawyer slid the court paper across and underlined distance. "Violation documented yesterday," he said, tone even and dry. Her mouth tightened around a response she didn't want recorded. The coordinator turned to the cleric with measured patience. "Any proof of alleged occult harm beyond conjecture?" He glanced at his notes, then folded them without a word. Silence did more damage than any argument he had. "Recommendation stands," the investigator concluded, clicking the tablet closed. "Monitored interactions at a neutral site, no unscheduled approaches." She rose halfway and demanded cultural oversight with shaking hands. "Denied, recorded, filed." A door closed softly behind that attempt. We walked out and the hallway felt cleaner underfoot. My partner squeezed my shoulder, then dialed the attorney. "Implement the long-term protections," he said, jaw set harder. The answer came fast, paperwork ready in 2 hours. Outside, a marked cruiser idled by the curb for escort. The officer rolled beside us, window low for a quick update. "Patrol will swing past your block until further notice," he promised. I nodded once and texted the counselor to expect new documents. By midday, the email pinged, order signed and logged. No proximity near home, no surprise visits at any facility. All contact routed through the coordinator's office only. I forwarded it to every gatekeeper in our orbit. At pickup, 2 school monitors flanked the walkway like anchors. She stood beyond the far crosswalk with a camera crew. The officer from earlier approached her with the fresh paper. He gestured to the marked boundary and waited for compliance. She smiled for the lens and tried a final performance. "Tell the audience you are anti-heritage," she prodded loudly. I met the camera and used the same measured cadence. "I am pro-child," I answered and watched watchers recalibrate. Ava slipped her hand into mine without looking back once. We crossed to the car while the crew hunted another angle. Behind us, the officer pointed at the curb and shook his head. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, the crew filmed a retreat. On the drive home, my phone lit with an unknown number. A new voice introduced internal affairs from the church council. "We've received complaints about unauthorized interventions," the caller stated. "Provide copies," I said, and scheduled a transfer by afternoon. We pulled into the driveway and saw fresh chalk near the mailbox. Not a symbol this time, a word in block letters. "Return," the officer photographed it before I could blink. "Harassment continues," he noted, then radioed the tag team. I grabbed our cam and recorded the scrape pattern carefully. We bagged a fragment after a forensic tech gave instructions. Chain of custody established in 5 deliberate moves. I signed the label and taped it shut with calm. Her sedan rolled past slow, then sped up at the corner. No stop at the chalk, no exchange of stares. The cruiser behind us flashed once and kept distance. She vanished down the hill, not gone, just regrouping. An hour later, the coordinator called with unexpectedly good news. The teacher named in the text refused participation, he reported. She provided a statement condemning the planned spectacle. He forwarded the letter, it read like a spine. I sent a brief thank you and saved another copy. My partner built a packet labeled Final Set for Council. We added the neighbor's retraction and the patrol logs. We added today's chalk sample and the updated boundary note. Right then, her number surfaced again with a voicemail preview. Consent to cleansing before sundown, the transcript. T demanded dryly. I opened the file and played it at low volume. Her cadence shook, pressure was cracking her careful stage. The attorney met us on video with a precise checklist. File for extension, seek contempt if she crosses again. He asked for a personal statement from each of us. I read mine into the mic with clipped control. He turned to my partner who steadied himself by the desk. I acknowledge past hesitation, my partner began, eyes burning. I stand with my family without exceptions, a breath, file everything. The attorney nodded once, then sent the final draft. Evening crept toward the time her parade had loved before. Patrol cars looped the block at even intervals without show. Neighbors waved from stoops and stayed available for verification. No crowd gathered, only a quiet that felt earned. I tucked Ava in with her nighttime hair routine sharp and simple. She reached up and touched the fabric like a promise. Do I still get to build models? She asked, cautious. Yes, I said, next one gets a ribbon, her grin flashed. Downstairs, my partner dialed his mother on speaker for closure. She answered on the third ring with a brittle hello. Listen carefully, he began, voice low and solid as a beam. You will meet us only through the monitor center from now on. A long pause filled the line with static and heat. She tried guilt first, then heritage, then a prayer under breath. He didn't budge, obey the court, respect our choices. The silence after that cut ties cleaner than any speech. She gave one last warning about elders waiting in judgment. I marked the timestamp and saved the clip for counsel. My partner ended the call and exhaled like a finally freed diver. We stood there not moving while the house held steady. A final email arrived from the coordinator with signatures attached. Plan approved, monitored sessions optional at your discretion. Optional, that word changed the temperature of my blood. We chose no for now and wrote it in bold. I walked the porch once more and looked at the curb line. The chalk remained, a record we had already secured. I lifted a brush and swept the rest into a bin. Evidence kept, message erased, power reclaimed without ceremony. Inside, the phone stayed on the table, face down and quiet. I sat with my child's project schedule and traced next steps. Science night on Friday, club on Tuesday, hair night always. We built forward piece by piece while the case locked tight. Near midnight, an alert pinged from the church council's address. They suspended the cleric pending review of the reported actions. They opened a channel for restitution discussions if harm occurred. I forwarded it to council and watched my hands stop shaking. Before sleep, I checked the front camera one last time. A stray cat trotted past and swatted at the empty curb. For the first time in weeks, silence wasn't a trap. It sounded like a boundary that finally held under weight.